So there will be an exam probably on. If I don't give it to you tomorrow, I might save it till Thursday, because that way it would make more sense. So like on our lab day, I'll give you the exam. That way you'll have some extra time to study for it, and I'll have extra time to make it. Because I'm pretty sure I already made it before, but I probably lost it, so I'll just have to make a new exam. Um, Anyways, let's start with what we left off with last week. Let me, of course, stream my screen. Okay, you can see it now. And my site, days and year, ternary HTML table, portfolio, math, animate. Okay, so we're at portfolio. That's what we're doing, right? So far, this is all we did. I created a nice looking header. Of course, these links don't work currently because I don't have these pages created yet, but we'll probably start working on that today. Create some new pages. Um, but what's nice about this is, everything works pretty nicely. This stays here, this one stays here. And you saw that I could, change that with display flex. I could have this arranged a bunch of different ways, like have them spread out. But I think it looks nice this way. So let me open up Visual Studio Code. And are we on the right project here, or is this the other class? Yep, this is the one. Okay, so you guys all have this right now. I don't know if I posted it on OneDrive yet. Let me double check. If we go to our Google Classroom, I think I posted this on our OneDrive folder. So um, and also during the 2 lab days, I think you guys had time to build something similar to this. So you don't have to have exactly what I have, but you should have something similar. Yeah, there it is. So header with Flexbox. Found it. So yeah, I did upload it, header with Flexbox. So you guys should be able to download it. Just in case you don't have it yet, go download it. The link is in your Google Classroom. And it looks like I also left this assignment as a draft. I was supposed to post it. I don't know why it didn't get posted yet, but it just says part 1, create a header, use CSS Flexbox to position your navigation buttons, see example, and then this was the example, but I guess I forgot to post it. Let me copy this link, and here I'll just make sure this is actually posted. Assign. This will, I'll edit this to include the rest of what we're gonna be doing, but part 1 is just creating the header, okay? And here, in case you still don't have this, I'm gonna post it in the Discord. All right. So we got our header, and it's not much. It's just a header with a div inside for the logo. And you saw me quickly create a logo for myself with my initials. I just used a font that I like, and I just, you know, did some small edits to it to make it look like a logo. Um, and then we have our nav in there as well. And notice that the logo and the nav are at the same level. So basically, think of these as siblings of the same parent. Okay. Um, since they're, the both of these are inside header. They're directly inside the header, and there's only two things in there. That means in order to get this to look the way it does, remember you can't put block level elements like a div and a nav next to each other. So what I did was I changed the display. What do you call it? Yeah, the display property for the header. I changed it to grid, and that way I was able to split up the header into two columns. One is going to be 8 times the size of the other one because I put 1 FR and 8 FR. So that's why this one takes up most of the space, and then we have a little bit of space for the logo. So if you can, you can't really tell like this because these are all grouped together. But if I changed the where is it? The flex, instead of flex end here on the nav unordered list, which is inside the nav, this one. Instead of flex end, which puts them all on the right side, I could put space between or space evenly, so you can see that they really do take up 8 times more than the logo. You can see it takes up this entire area, while the logo only takes up this area. So that's what the 1 FR 8 FR does for us for on the header. Okay, so it gives the nav a lot more space than the div. Okay, and I'm gonna switch that back though. Let's put this back to flex and, or even space evenly would be better than, oops, not flex evenly, space evenly. That one, at least, it gives it more padding on the sides. This one, so I'm okay with this layout, and I'm okay with flex end. So it's totally up to you how you want to do it. Just gonna keep it like this for now. Okay, before we move on from the header and start adding other content, I think it's important that we do try to make this a little bit more responsive. As nice as this is, it's not really responsive. If I imagine I have a bigger menu, let's say I just copy paste these. Imagine I have 6 menu items instead of just 3. You can see what happens here. Once my screen gets too small, they don't really fit next to each other. They start going on the next line. I mean, it's still doable. It's not that bad right now, but I don't know. Let's look at it on a phone. If we were to inspect this, let's click here, and you can see on a phone, on a mobile, it's gonna be pretty bad. It doesn't fit. And I don't know. This isn't 100% accurate. The most accurate way to look at this would be to actually have a phone and put this on the phone and see how it looks. But you can see it doesn't fit. It's making me scroll to the right and stuff. So so we need to, instead of displaying the full menu whenever you look at it, we need to create a hamburger button like most websites. Let's just go to like bestbuy.com, for example, just as a Best Buy. Well, theirs is okay. No, um, let's see. Yeah, they have a menu here, but besides that, there's all these buttons. Right now, they're displaying fully like that, but once we make this smaller, I guess never mind. Theirs is just full time a menu button like this. Okay, bad example. Um, what about Sony? I always end up going to like the same three websites. I don't know why I can't think of others. Okay, so they have this full menu. Let's make it smaller. Okay, there you go. So whenever the screen gets smaller, turns into this. And I guess whenever it's like not all the way small, um, half of the menu is hidden. I don't know if that's just for computers it displays that way. Let me check it on a phone. I mean, it should be fully responsive. It's Sony, so let's check it out on a bigger device like an iPad. Yeah, I guess it works fine. Rotate it sideways. Anyways, okay, so we need to make this hamburger icon. All right, so there's the whole. We could animate it. You see how it goes from these three lines, changes to an X. We can animate that with CSS, but I don't know if we'll have time to go through the entire animation process for that. So for now, I'll just make a button that you can click on to open the menu like this, and you can click on it again to close it. That's what we'll focus on. Alrighty, so in order to create this, it's also gonna go inside the header. So think about what element is gonna hold it. Right, that button is gonna replace all these basically. So it has to go inside the header, and I'll place it. It doesn't matter really where you place this one. Actually, it kind of does. You want it to come after the logo. Um, you don't want it to be in front of the logo. So you want it to come after the logo. And this is gonna mean that we might have to change some stuff. Actually, we really don't have to change anything because we're either gonna see the menu or we're gonna see the menu button. We're not gonna see both at the same time. So that means we could still keep it as two columns, one FR and 8 FR. We don't have to make it three columns. But temporarily though, we are gonna see both at the same time. So let me put this after or before the nav. It doesn't really matter. I'm gonna create a div. So go ahead and create a div right there after the nav inside the header. So it's gonna be child1, child2, and here's our third child is another div. But give this div a class or maybe an ID equal to menu button menu dash button. Sometimes I call it hamburger, but menu dash button btn like that. It's nice and short, and you know what it is. So create that, and inside of that, you could just find a picture of the three lines. I mean, you could go online and look up a hamburger button, not shopping images. It's just this. Like, there's no reason to go out on the internet and find a picture of three lines. You could You can make that yourself. You could even make it with spans. You could draw this thing with spans. So just create um I don't know why I make them spans. I could just make them divs. It could be really any element. It could be a paragraph if you want, or a H1. It really doesn't matter. We could use whatever we want, but it wouldn't make sense to put a paragraph or a H1 because then people will think, is there some kind of text inside there? There isn't. But you could just use them as little containers to give a little background color and a width and a height to create a horizontal bar, and get 3 of those to create the hamburger button because there's 3 lines, right? I already closed it. I don't know why I keep closing things and trying to open them again. Go away. Okay. But yeah, it's just 3 lines. So I'll do them with I'm just gonna stick with spans because normally that's what I do. I make 3 spans. 1, 2, 3. Line 1, line 2, and line 3. Okay, and with CSS, we're gonna turn these lines into, these spans into lines. Okay, so we don't need to give them a class name or anything. At least, not yet. Actually, we never need to. Even if we're trying to animate it, we still won't need to give them any class names. But I don't know if we'll get to animating it. But for now, just create 3 spans inside the menu button. And we'll go to our CSS to style that because currently you're not going to be able to see it. See, it's there somewhere, you just can't see it. Or I think it's there. I don't know exactly where this div is currently. You could see it if you give it a background color and a width, but right now it has 0 width, 0 height. Or actually it probably has a width of 100%, but 0 height, so we can't really see it. You could inspect and then look for it this way in the body. Why am I right clicking? Body header. There it is. Div menu button. You can see when I hover over it, it doesn't have a size like the div and the nav do. This one menu button is just here somewhere, it's just invisible. Okay. So let's make it visible. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna go to styles, and we're looking at, I like to keep my styles the same order I have my index, my HTML. So if we have header up top, and then we have a div and a nav inside, and then after that we have these boxes, then I keep the order sort of the same. So here, if I have header, after the header I have the logo, and I have the nav. So logo and then the nav. And here we're putting the menu button after the nav. So here also I'll put it after the nav. So I'll put dot menu dash btn. And how big do we want the menu button to be? Let's just, for now, I'm gonna say height 100%. Let's see if that takes up the height of the header. Since it's inside the header, I'm giving it a height of 100%. It should take up the same height as the header, but I'm not sure if it's gonna work. Well, we won't know till we give it some kind of background color. I'm putting a temporary color just so I can see it. Height, we still can't see it. Oh, dot menu button. It's because I made it an ID, not a class. Should be a hashtag, not a dot. because this is ID, not class. If it was class, then it would be a dot, but if it's an ID, you gotta use a hashtag. Okay, so there it is. So it's right there. The height is not as tall as I thought it would be. It's only 10. So I guess it thinks the height of the um, header is 10 pixels. But in reality, what is the height of the header? We didn't really, oh yeah, we did. We gave it a height of 70 pixels. So making this 100% should have made that 70 pixels. I'm not sure why it didn't. We could just say 70 pixels here. Okay, now it's actually 70 pixels. So yeah, I do want the button to be pretty big. I mean, it doesn't have to be that big. I could make it maybe 50 pixels, and then give it a width of 50 pixels as well. Just make it a square. Oh, not XP, PX. Make a little square like that. And now we just need to put it there. Actually, now we need to hide it. And we need to only show it whenever the screen is smaller than a certain number of pixels. You could check when you right click and inspect like this, whenever it's showing this side panel here. If you make this go away, it should show you the width of your screen at any moment when you're resizing it. Like for me right now, I can see it's at 803 pixels here. And if I make it a little bigger, it's like 900. Here's 1,000. It gets too small around like 500, but I'm gonna start early at around 800 pixels. That's when I'm gonna switch from this to the hamburger button. Okay, so we're gonna leave this as is right here, but we're gonna say display none. That way we could hide it. Menu button display none, so you can't see it anymore. But I'm gonna use what's called a media query again to change the CSS depending on if my screen is this big or this big or this big. I can change the CSS accordingly. So in order to do that, you need to create what's called the media query, which looks like this. You start with at, you write media, and then you say screen. And sometimes I see them add only, screen only, but just say at media screen. And max dash width, let's say 800 pixels. That's the size I wanted to switch it whenever it gets to 800 pixels. And then you do an open and close curly bracket. So it looks like this: at media screen and max dash width 800 pixels. And then anything inside here is only gonna work if the screen is less than 800 pixels. Okay, and since CSS is read from like it's read from top down, so the last thing you put is gonna be overriding the things that came before it. So in other words, if let's say I put header height 70 pixels, and then later if I put header height 500 pixels, you'll notice it's going to be 500 pixels. It's not going to be 70 pixels because it's going to be whatever is read last. Since this came last, this is going to override anything that came before it. Okay, so when we create this at media screen and max dash width, 800 pixels. Since it comes after the top stuff, it's gonna override it. Except since we're putting max with 800 pixels, it's only gonna override it if the screen is less than 800 pixels. Does that make sense? So if I say, I'll do the same thing. I'll say header height 500 pixels. Okay, you can see the header now got taller, but it's only because the screen is less than 800 pixels. If I make it bigger, see, it goes back to normal. But once it's less than 800 pixels, that's when this takes over and it overrides this height 70 pixels that I put earlier. Okay, it's only doing it at max width of 800 pixels. Okay, so this is a very useful thing you can do with CSS. But of course, we're not going to use it to make the header all tall like that. Instead, we're going to use it to, we're going to hide the nav. I don't have a rule for a nav here because I didn't really need it. Like, I didn't have a nav something here, but it's because we're only changing the CSS for the UL inside there. But we don't really need anything for the nav, but here I do. I'm gonna say nav display none. Okay, so whenever my screen is smaller, this thing will just disappear. It just goes away. Okay, but only at 800 pixels or less. I'm also gonna bring back the menu button because here I put display none. I'll say menu or hashtag menu dash btn. Here we'll bring it back with display, I guess just block, display block. So what happens when I make the screen smaller? The menu disappears and the button appears. So now we're kind of getting somewhere. Menu disappears, button appears. Now there's another way you could change CSS depending on, well, in this case we're using a media query, changing it depending on the screen size. But remember, you can also do hovers. You could hover over something, and if you're hovering over it, you could change the CSS. Actually, I haven't showed you yet how you could hover over one item. You could hover over a menu button, and you can reveal its sibling if it's hidden. So that's possible as well. Actually, it only works with siblings that come after it, I think. So just a quick rearrangement I have to make. I need to put the menu button in front of the nav right now, because I'm going to need to hover over the menu button and change the CSS of the nav. And I don't know why it just works that way. Okay, there's something called a sibling selector that you can use to like hover over one item and then change the CSS for another item. And it looks like this. See, we have our menu button, and we're only going to be seeing the menu button on 800 pixels or less. So I'll do all that styling inside here. I'll say hashtag menu dash button colon hover. Okay, so when we hover over the menu button, you could change the styling for the menu button like this. If you just you did something like this, like background color, change it to crimson. Of course, you could do that. It changes the color of the menu button itself. But what if I'm not trying to change the button, the menu button whenever I hover over it? Maybe I want to hover over the menu button. I'm going to hover over this, but I want to change this instead of the menu button itself. So we can do that like this. We just need to put the sibling selector, like I said, and it looks like this. Um, Actually, there's two of them. One of them is a squiggly line, which is right above the tab button on your keyboard, like next to the number 1. You gotta press shift, and then you can get that. So menu button hover, then we can target nav like this. And then we can say display block, and then bring that back. I don't think it's working. I don't know if this needs to be touching. I doubt it, no. Menu button, hover. Make the nav appear. Okay, because here we're setting it to none. Here we want to bring it back. Let me figure out why it's not working. Let's see, turn these off for a second, and sure enough, there it is. But with this turned on, display none, it disappears, and I'm trying to make it come back by hovering over the menu button. Let's see, they need to be direct siblings. That's important. And they're next to each other. Here's the menu button, there's the nav. Um, Not sure what the reason is, but let's try active. Active means you have to be clicking on it. Nope, doesn't make a difference. It wouldn't make sense if it did. So I'm not sure what we're missing here. Display block, display none. Huh. Looks like I did everything correctly. I know I'm missing something. Okay, that's a bummer. I didn't expect that problem so soon. Why don't we take a look at the sibling selector, make sure we're using it correctly. I'm pretty sure I am, but doesn't hurt to look it up on W3 Schools. So there's the plus sign, that's the second sibling selector. You could use a plus sign. That's the adjacent sibling selector, separates two selectors and matches the second element only if it immediately follows the first element and both are children of the same parent element. So technically I should be able to use the plus sign instead of the squiggly line. I don't know if that's gonna make a difference though, because I don't think it would. Oh, you know what? I didn't save something. That's why it's not working. I didn't save this file after I made a change. See, after I moved this from the bottom, remember I told you it has to be in front of the nav for this to work? Well, that proves my point. I never saved it after I moved this in front of it, so it wasn't working. There we go. Now it is. Okay. Just forgot to save that. So this has to be in front of the nav. It can't come after the nav. So we could hover over that, and we can change the CSS of the menu. We can make it appear. And you can use the plus sign or the squiggly line for that one. See, the squiggly line works as well, as long as the button comes before the nav. Alrighty. Now, what else? So here the buttons are all the way on the right side. That's because they're inside the UL, and well, they're inside the nav inside the UL. And remember, I put justify content flex and for the UL. Well, I don't have something similar for the button, so the button just shows up in the front. So what can I do about that? Um, well, the button is it's inside the header. So, and what did I put for the display on the header? I put display grid. Um, I think what I need to do is just align text align on the right. Actually, that's probably not gonna work. Nope, it's still there. That, of course, that wouldn't work. How can we push it to the right side? Uh, justify content. Guess we could do the same thing. Justify content, flex, and oh, but it's not really display flex, so that's not gonna work either. What can we do? What can we do? Oh, um, yeah, I think I have to make the width of this. No, that doesn't make sense. I need to see the columns, so I'm gonna inspect it. Just hover over it to see exactly what's going on. We've got our header. So that entire blue area that's highlighted is the header. Inside we've got the logo. Then we've got the menu button. And I want the menu button to be on the right side. Oh, another thing we need to do whenever we're at 800 pixels or less, we hide the nav. We show this, but whenever we hover over this, we don't want of course, we don't want the menu to just show up like that, the way it was, or else that defeats the purpose of hiding it in the first place. We also need to change the CSS of how the menu buttons are showing. Right now they're next to each other because of again, because I put display flex and I did justify content flex. And well, luckily there's with display flex you could also change something called the flex direction, and we could set it to column or row, or column reverse, row reverse. This is what it would look like with column. See, it's coming out this way. So we kind of want that, but only at the smaller size. We don't really want it on the full size. So I'm going to put the flex direction column on this one. On nav UL. Oops. Flex direction column. Okay, that's sort of now working how we want. Except it seems to be, it has a very small width. Not sure why it like about me is not, about me with the two letters next to each other. I don't know what's getting squished together like that. Let me see. Let me turn off the display none for a second, just so it's always showing. And then let's hover over it, and it has a, looks like it has a width of 71.77. Oh, and I think that's because it's showing along with the button. So whenever I hover over the button, all of a sudden we have 3 things showing inside the header instead of 2, and there's no room for that third thing. So what can we do? We need to custom change the width of that. Right now it's trying to be the same width as the, what do you call it? The logo, which is 50 pixels, or not the 50 pixels actually, but the 1FR. It's taking on that size because there's still 2 columns. So there's still 2 columns inside the header, but now we have 3 things. We have the menu button, we have the logo, the menu, and then right below on the next row is the menu button, and it's being 1FR because remember it's the first column inside this 2 column grid, and so it's taking up that size. So we have to custom change the width of it, and the way you do that is by going to the menu button itself, and you can change how many columns you want it to span. You could say grid column. We could say span, I guess, and span 2, I believe that would work. No, grid column. Well, we could do this 1/8, I think. I'm not sure if that's gonna work. 1/8, no. 1/2. Oh yeah, 1/2, I guess, because it's still technically 2 columns. It's not 8, even though I put 8FR. It's still just 2 columns. So by putting 1/2, I'm basically saying I want this to span from the first column to the second column. And actually, I think we could do 0, 2. Starts counting. Nope, that doesn't work. Just 1, 2. Okay, so now the width is taken care of, but obviously we have other issues. So next, this hover thing is only temporary, by the way. Later I'm going to change it to use a different, instead of hover, we're going to put this on, I guess, well, not active, but focus. But I guess might as well start putting it on focus now. So focus is when you're tabbed to something, whenever it's selected. Okay, so when you press tab on the keyboard, you'll notice like different things get highlighted, like this is highlighted, this is highlighted. All the things that I'm tabbing through are those are the ones that you put focus on. Okay, but you can't put it just on any element. Like you could notice it when I tab through here, I'm pressing tab, but it's never going to the logo, it's never going to this box. That's because it only works on certain buttons. Like these are buttons, they're links, so you can tab to them, but just the general other elements you can't tab to unless you give them a special attribute. So here's the menu button. That special attribute you need to give it is um, tab index. So just give it a tab index and put any number. And now when I tab, you can see this does get selected. So now I can actually tab to the menu button, meaning I can focus on it. So when you click on something, it's being focused on. So now I don't have to hover over this, I just click on it. As long as it's the last thing I clicked, the menu will open up. And I click away and it goes away. So that's better than having to hover and then like flashing around. Because of course, if you hover over this and then you try to click these, it'll disappear because you'll no longer be hovering over this. But with focus, you can click on it and then move your mouse away and it still stays open because it's still focused. The focus goes away once you click somewhere else. So you could try to click these buttons, but then there's a one more problem, which is the focus goes away so fast that the click never goes through. So I'm trying to click gallery, but I'm not actually getting to click on it. If I did click on gallery, you would see this page. So you can tell that it's not working because the focus just disappears really fast. So you can slow it down by adding a little bit of animation. Okay, you could slow it down by adding a transition. So here's the focus, and we can add transition. So with transition, you have to choose how many seconds you want the transition to last. You could also put a transition delay. Let's look at transition in W3 schools. So you have transition delay duration, which is how long you want it to last. I think that's pretty much it. And then you have to put what you want to transition. So if you're changing the width of something, you want it to take 2 seconds to grow in width, 4 seconds to grow in height. You would write it like this, separated by commas. Here we're changing from display block or display none to block. So you can't really animate that. So that's another problem we have to change. Instead of changing from display block to display none or display none to block, another way of hiding things is by changing the opacity. Changing opacity to 0 will obviously make it disappear. Or you could change the height. You could go from whatever the normal height is to 0 and it'll sort of disappear. But the width will always be there. Okay. Now I'm gonna first try to do the transition with a delay, just because if I do end up changing the width, instead of changing from display none, if I just change it to something like height 0 to hide it, the problem with that is here I'm planning on having something that only has 2 columns, but if I add that, if I never change it from display block to none, then there's actually always going to be 3 things in the grid column. So I'm going to have to change the grid columns if it comes to that. But let me try with a transition first. Let's say transition 0.5 seconds for the delay. And let's do 0.5 seconds for how long I want it to last. And what do we want to transition? The display property. And yeah, but again, I don't think we can animate changing from display none to block, so might not work. Wait, what did I change here? Oops. I forgot to change this back to display. None. There we go. Yeah, it's not really animating. Or it's not delaying it at all. Okay. So we'll have to take care of that. Um, okay, let's take it slow though so you don't get confused. Is there any questions so far? Kind of, I don't know, I should have maybe gone a different order doing this. Actually, did it just delay? Oh, look, it does. Oh, never mind. Okay, anyways, I think we have no choice. We have to switch from display block to, we have to use height. So it's gonna change a few things. So starting from the beginning, we need to make sure it does have a final height. We're talking about the menu button. The two things that are gonna be hiding and showing, it's the menu button and the nav. So we end up having to use this because we do need to give it a specific height, and I'll just say 70 pixels, same as the header. 70 pixels, and I want to center the stuff inside it, so I'm gonna have to say display. I guess I could say flex. Nope, that's not a good idea. Display grid. Okay, and then align items center. Okay, just to center it. Next, what do we need to do? So we gave it a height 70 pixels, so we know that's the height that it needs to have here to show. But then again, that's only for here. Whenever it's growing this way, we're actually going to make the height something different, right? Because obviously it's going to be a column instead of a row. So it's going to have it's going to be taller than 70. It's going to be maybe like 200, 300 pixels tall in order to see all of the buttons. So let's go back down to the media query where, this is where things are happening when the screen is smaller. Here, instead of display none, we're going to say height 0. So alternate way of hiding it. Height 0, but you could still see it. In order to hide it, you have to say overflow hidden. So anything that doesn't fit inside that 0 pixel height, you're not going to see it. So it disappears. Instead of you seeing it right now, it's gone. And then we bring it back in here when we focus on the nav. Instead of changing the display property, we're going to say height. You could put auto to, if you don't know how tall it needs to be, you could put auto, but problem is you won't be able to transition from 0 to auto. You can't really transition that. So I was gonna have to transition from height, maybe take 0.2 seconds delay, maybe a 0.3 second animation, but again, you can't transition to an auto height. You have to actually put a number in there. So you see it just pops open instead of taking 0.2 seconds and animating the height. That's because auto doesn't work. We have to actually put like 300 pixels or whatever the height is supposed to be. And there you go. So now it actually animates. because now it's going, instead of going from 0 to auto, which you can't do, it's going from 0 to 300 pixels. There's like a slight delay, 0.2 second delay. I could probably just put 0.1 second, enough to be able to click the button. Oh, and right now it's only transitioning one way. It's only transitioning on the way down, not on the way back. And really, on the way back is when I really need to delay it a little bit with that 0.1 second delay. So in order to transition this going back instead of just forward, you put this on the original. Actually, it'll do it both ways if you do it this way. We're changing the nav, right? So just on the nav, put that transition. So it still transitions this way, but it will also transition going back the other way. You see, it kind of takes a second when I click. Well, you can't tell because you can't really tell when I'm clicking my mouse, but I click and it takes like a split second before it closes again because of that 0.1 second delay. Okay, so if you put it here, the transition, it will transition both ways, opening and closing. But if you put it here, it only does it on opening. Because again, they're both targeting the nav. This is changing the height of the nav, and then this is changing the height and other stuff on the nav. They're both nav. Just one is only when you focus on something else. The other one is just default nav. So put it here if you want it to be both ways transition. Okay, so far this obviously there's a lot of work to be done. We click this, okay, yeah, we can open and close a navigation, but it's not really positioned the way we want it to be positioned. Okay, and now because I always have three things here, I need to change the number of columns here I've got. So what can we do? It's always going to be three things here. One of them, the button, we're just going to have to give it like 0 space. I'm not sure if we could put 0 for it, because at first we don't really want to see it. Like here we don't need to see it, and that's good, it's not there. But then whenever we're at the smaller screen size, oh, actually, it's not really a problem at all. We have grid template columns 1FR, 8FR for header here. That's because we're going to be seeing the button there. I mean, we're not going to see the button. It's always going to be 2 columns. We just need to change it for here. So again, it's the header. So we just need to say header. And then instead of grid template column 1FR, 8FR, we're going to need, let's see, 1FR. It's going to have to change a little bit. Because it's still, even though you don't see these right now, they're still taking up 8FR. It's not display none, it's just height 0. So it's invisible, but these buttons right now are still taking up 8 out of, like, I don't know if that's 8 out of 9 or what, but taking up a big portion of this thing right now. That's why this is down here. So I guess we could just change that to like 2FR and then add some space for this one. Another 2FR. Why don't we just do 1FR, 1FR, 1FR? That's fine. And one more thing. trying to make room for this button now to be here, but it's still down here. Let's see why. It's another child of the header. There's 1, 2, 3. So we should be able to put 1, 2, 3, but let's see. Grid template, grid column 1/2. Yeah, that's probably why. I don't think we need this anymore. Actually, we do need it to show it. Just we don't need that. Okay, so now it's gonna be there. And it's pushing. So when this opens, now it's pushing the whole thing down. Geez, this is more trouble than it's worth. Trying to explain how to create this thing. So many things that need to change. So now I have to get into something called position absolute. Just kind of like when I was learning it, it was really annoying, difficult to learn. But position absolute basically lets you position something relative to its parent. So you could say like the menu right now is inside the header, right? The header is the parent. So I could like force the header to be at the bottom of the parent, so make it stuck to the bottom of the header. So um, but I don't know if that's gonna ruin the whole grid display. Let's see. If we say nav height 300 pixels, position absolute, bottom 0. Oh, now it's all the way down there. That's fine. That's because my header doesn't have a this. So thing about when you put absolute, put bottom 0. It's gonna be positioned at the 0 pixels away from the bottom of the closest parent that also has a position other than the default. So it's a lot to take in, but basically I haven't used position property anywhere. So right now the default for position, if you don't change it, is static. Okay. Now everything has static on it except for this nav right now, because I just changed it to absolute. Now in order to be able to position this not all the way down here on the bottom of the screen, but on the bottom of the header also has to have a position property set, but anything other than static. And the safest one to use is called position relative, which lets you position things relative to where they normally would be. So if I just put this on position relative, nothing really changes. It's back to how it was. So I'll put this one on position absolute, and on the header, I'll put position relative. Okay, as long as it's not static, if it's position relative or anything else, then when I say bottom 0 on on this thing, it's gonna stick to the bottom of its parent. So it looks like it's sticking there for some reason, up there. Let's see, can we get it to go where we really want it to go? Let's say height 300 pixels, position absolute. Let's try top 0. There we go. Well, now it's sticking to the top. Let's say top 70 pixels. Because, the thing is 70 pixels tall, so we want it to start 70 pixels down from there. There we go. So that's kind of where we want it. We want it to come out all the way down there. And when I click away, some weird thing happens. I'm not sure what that's caused by. Let's If I think about it for a second, I guess I'll figure it out. But we open that, but once it's going away, this jump happens where this thing goes to the right side and slides up. Um, it's probably because this top 70 pixels goes away and the position absolute goes away. So maybe we need to keep this, instead of just here on the focus, maybe we should keep this here on the original. So yeah, that fixes that. So now when I click it, it pops out from the bottom. I click away, it goes back away, same way it came. Now, again, there's a lot of things I'm doing, like that it might be hard to keep up, but I had to put this on the nav here instead of here, because whenever it was here, position absolute top 70, all those only apply while I'm focusing on this. So when the focus is gone, it no longer has position absolute, so it no longer behaves the same way. That's why I moved it from there to here. So it's always position absolute and always top 70. That just keeps it in the same position always. Instead of like switching from position something to something else, like it's just gonna cause inconsistencies and you're gonna have problems. So just put it there all on the original nav, so it's always position absolute, always top 70. Okay, what's next? So this is here at the moment, but kind of want it all the way there. How can we get it to go there? Well, I think we have to force it, because currently I have one FR, one FR, one FR. So really it's one FR for the logo, one FR for the button, one FR for the navigation. But I kind of want to change the order. It's going by the order of what I put in the HTML. The logo, button, and the nav. So we have to use grid template column, or not grid template column, just grid column. And then with grid column, you could change the, here, let's look at grid column W3 schools. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, my internet disconnected. When did that happen? Where was I? Okay, so let's backtrack a little bit. So I made a few changes, right? Instead of changing display none to display block to hide and show something, I decided to go, well, I had to go from height, whatever it is, to height 0, because you can hide things by just making them have no height, and setting overflow to hidden. You could hide something that way, and then you can make it reappear by just increasing the height. And we had to do that because display none to display block is not something you can transition, right? You can't slow down something, from showing and not showing, but you can slow down the height getting smaller and bigger, right? You can make the height slowly increase, or take 0.3 seconds to increase, and delay that like 0.1 second animation. So that's why I did the height 0 overflow hidden. So I'm transitioning that on the nav. We're doing that. So originally the nav has 70 pixels, but whenever we get to a small screen size, I make it go away slowly. Not slowly, it's pretty quick, but it's a transition. You can see it takes you see when I make it smaller, it takes a little second to disappear. So it's already kicking in, but I didn't really make it for that one. I didn't add the transition so that I could see it for a split second when I make the screen smaller, but that's just a little side effect. Um, what I really made it for is when I click the button and it comes out, and then when I click it again to go to one of these pages, there's that 1.1 second delay that allows me to actually register the click, able to click gallery, and it actually goes to gallery. If I don't put um, that little delay, I don't even think I need the delay. The animation itself might be enough to slow it down, but I added a delay just in case. But you can see here, if I don't have any delay, it just pops out, goes back away. When I try to click a button, it happens so fast the click doesn't register. So that's why we need that transition. Also, it makes it look nicer, right? It slides up and down. So that's better than the way it was before. So now we could actually click and go to another page. And I was saying right now there's a logo, there's the button, and then there's the menu itself. The menu itself is supposed to be here, but we moved it with position absolute. But it's still technically taking up this area. And that's because of the order that we put it in here. It's going to be the same order that is in the HTML. It's the logo, the div, and the nav. Now they're all taking up one fraction each. But if you want to change the order, you want to force it to change, you need to use the CSS grid column property. So you could say grid column 1 over span 2, or just 1 over 2 will work too, I think. Just let me see the example. So here's okay, this one helps. This picture. You see the first, we got, okay, grid template column, auto, 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 auto. That's kind of the same as 1FR, 1FR, 1FR. You could put auto instead of 1FR. It's just 1FR makes it all exactly the same size. Auto, they could be different sizes. And right now they are still equal though. But on item 1, item 1 is the first item in the grid, has a class of item 1. They put grid column 1 over span 2. So that means you want to start from the first line and you start counting from like the sides. Like this is the first, like 1 is this. But span 2 just means you want to span 2 columns. So from starting from here, you want to span 1, 2. I think that's how it works. Like you could put 2 here, I'll just go back there, so it's going from 1 to 2. So if you wanted to do the same as before, you'd have to put 1 over 3. It would go from 1, 2, 3. Or you can say span 2. Kind of does the same. I find the span thing a little more... Actually, it's not confusing at all. You want it to be, instead of spanning 1 like normal, you say span 2, then takes up 2 spots. But you could also force it to change position. If I say I want this to start from, instead of 1, I want to start from here, and I want to go to here, I can say 2 to 3, not span 3, but just 2 to 3. And now it's going from there to there. Or I could go 3 to 4. Now the 1 is all the way there. And we could bring the 2 back that way. We put like item 2 instead. Say we want that one to go from 1 to 3. But then you also have to change like the there's grid column, there's also grid row. We want to go from row 1 to 2. So there we go. We kind of, by doing all that, we switched the position. So now 2 is in the place of 1. So with grid column and grid row, you're able to reposition things. So I kind of want to do that with the button. I want to make sure that button is on the right side. So menu button, we'll just say grid column. We want it to go from, let's see, 1 to 3. I think starting from 3 to 4, I think what we have to do. I think that worked, yeah, but it's not aligned on the right side. Not sure where we need to add align items right for that to happen. Or flex end. Or justify content. Sorry, not align items. Justify content. Flex end. Nope. Right does not work either. We have to use flex end. So maybe here. The menu button is inside the header. I think that's where I have to put it. Nope, that still doesn't work. Maybe that only works with display flex. Yeah, only works with display flex. So I'm not sure how we would do it with display grid. How do we get the content to line up on the right side? Maybe I could use position absolute with that as well. So on the menu button, I'll try using position absolute. Oops. And say right 0. Oops. 0. Yep, that works. Now we also want this to be on the right side. That's no problem. We're already using position absolute on that one. We're saying top 70 pixels. So it's 70 pixels away from the top, but we also want it to be on the right side. Right 0. There we go. So now it comes out from that side. I think top 70 is probably too much. I thought it should be top 0. That would make more sense, but it was not enough, it seemed like. So maybe we'll just increase it until it looks fine. It's a little too close. Let's do top 30. I think that's good. So that's kind of where you want the menu to appear. And also, instead of right 0, let's say right 20 pixels. Right, and we could also move the button a little bit. Instead of right 0, make it right 20 pixels. I think that's a little better. Cool, so now we have a button that we can click to show and hide the menu. I kind of want to get rid of that delay on the transition for the height. It's annoying whenever you make the screen bigger and smaller, you kind of see it for a split second. I'm just going to get rid of the delay for now, so we don't have that. We still have it animating, so but you don't see it as long at least. So now it's like instant when I click. But is that going to give us enough time to switch to another page? No, it's still, if you try to click on it, it doesn't register. So we do really need that 0.1 second delay. Um, oh, and I said it was going to be hamburger icon with 3 lines. So why don't we do that next? Before, oh, we're kind of out of time, but let's just throw this in real quick. Right now I'm giving the menu button itself, the whole menu button just has this blue violet background color, but let's quickly change that. We'll say menu btn span, because we're talking about now these spans that I put inside there. I put them there for a reason, right? To make those like 3 lines. So all of those menu button spans, I want them to have a height of, let's say, 5 pixels, a background color of just white, and a width of, what did I put, 50 pixels. And also it's a span, and spans are inline elements. You can't really put a width or a height on an inline element, so we need to change it to display block. Okay, so there they are, but we need to give them a little bit of padding to separate them. Padding, or not padding, margin. They each need a margin on top and the bottom. Let's say like 5 pixels. I'm not sure if that's too much or too little. Okay, maybe a little bit more. Let's say 10 pixel padding. And I mean 10 pixel margin, but we don't want it on the sides, so just 10 pixel 0. Okay. Let's go like 9 pixels. I want it to be a little more centered. There we go. 9 is keeping it more center. So 9 pixels, and then we don't need this background color anymore. Now it's just that. Okay, so I think that's enough. I mean, pretty difficult task to use just CSS. Normally, most websites that have menus like this, they don't just use CSS, they use JavaScript to get it done. But we're using just CSS. And the only thing left though is, what is left? I think there's not, wait, let's see. I mean, it's working. Why did it go back to the purple? That's weird. Yeah, it works. And I could even click it again to close it, which I didn't expect. I should not be able to do that, but it's working without me doing anything, so I'll take it. Cool. I guess now that we've done that, I think I feel comfortable stopping here. We'll continue tomorrow. So let's take a break. And let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so last thing we were doing was the animation. I think I saved that under math. Yeah, so I showed you how to create a single ball bouncing around. There's a slightly, there's different ways you could do it. You could use, the best way is to use request animation frame. If you want the smoothest animation, you should use that. But you could also use set timeout and set interval. Um, so I did assign you this on the OneDrive. I mean on Google Classroom. If you go to your classwork, got create a rectangle on the HTML canvas element. Wait, where's the rest of it? You can't really see the rest, can you? I don't know if you guys are able to see the full title here, but for me it only shows like partial. Let me see if I edit it. It should say draw a rectangle on the HTML canvas element and make it move. And then I put some instructions on how to do it. Um, yeah, well, here's the instructions. So first create a canvas element, get the canvas element in JavaScript with document.querySelector, and then in this example, I put the whole example. You could pretty much copy paste this to get a working moving object, but this example uses set interval. Okay, I used set interval for this just to make it the most basic possible example of how to make something move. If you do it this way, copy that exactly, um, you'll get this one here. It's very simple. I didn't add any bouncing, and it's not as smooth obviously because it uses set interval. Um, you could speed it up though, at least. I think we could speed that up. Let me open that with Notepad. Now it's going pretty slow because we're doing x plus plus, y plus plus, and I'm doing set interval every 100 milliseconds. I switched that to 16. Should go a little bit faster. Refresh. There we go. It's just gonna disappear though off the canvas and then never come back because again, it's a very basic example. Um, but the instructions are there. Okay, we'll try maybe another example. Um, but let's also open up the notes and see if there's any other important stuff we need to move on to. And then I don't know if we probably won't do it in this class, but web design or JavaScript too. When we do object-oriented programming, we'll be able to create multiple of those balls using what's called factory function or classes. Um, but for now, just if you can end up with something like this, that'll be great. Or make it bounce around even better. And I did record that lesson and put it up so you guys can always watch it if you need to see how I did it. And if I haven't posted it on the OneDrive, I will. Let me check if I did. Days in year, ternary, lesson 3. Nope, it's not there, so I'll put it there for you guys. This example right here. Call this ball bouncing. So I'm gonna take this and I'll put it on the OneDrive for you. And it's not called that math, that doesn't make sense. Bounce. Call it bounce and put it right there in the same folder where all the other lessons are. So it's gonna be in here. It's called bounce. And if you need this folder, if you don't have the link for it, um, here it is. I'll just post that in Discord. We need to look at the notes today and see what final things we need to cover. Okay, we haven't talked about looping, and looping is a very powerful feature. Um, we didn't cover the date object much, but the date object lets you get the new date and stuff. We can create a. Have we created a stopwatch in this class? If we haven't created a stopwatch yet, we should do that. But it doesn't really require the date object. That's more just another set interval type function that we need to create. But you could also do it with the date object. It's just unnecessarily complicated using the date object. Um, but yeah, date object lets you get the number of seconds for the current time. If you just here, let's do this right in the browser. Do an inspect. So you can say date, just date like that. It'll give you the current date, but you call it like a function, date and then parentheses. Um, you can say new date, and you'll notice it looks a little bit different. Here it gives you like a string in red, but if you say new date, it looks a little bit different. Because one just gives you the current date, just prints it out. The other one creates a new date object. So if you say let today equal new date, it will create a new date object and set it to today's date. And once you have a new date object like that, you can say like today dot get seconds, for example. It'll tell you at that moment when you created the date object, how many seconds were you in from that's current minute. If I say date dot get, um, let's do get year. Date is not defined. Oh, sorry, not date. I meant today dot get year. Um, year 121, because 2021 or 121 years from 1900. So I guess that's when it starts counting from. Today dot get full year, give you 2021, and you can look at all the. I mean, I listed pretty much all the properties and methods that are available with the date object here. Okay, so you could get the date and you could set the date on a date object. Um, I can't really think of anything cool, fun to do with the date object, so that's enough to cover it for now. Just remember there's a date object that lets you get the date, so you might need it for something. One thing that I think most often you'll use it for is like maybe you have a form that you have people fill out, and the form has like the current date, or not. Okay, not a form. Maybe you have like comments, right? You have comments or posts that you create or you let users create on your website. You can create a function that every time they create a new post, it will get the current date and record that in a database, so you know exactly when something was posted. But even then, it's kind of unnecessary. Most time, the database itself, as soon as you save the information, will automatically create the date and save it. So it's hard to think of really good use case right now, but there's so many different things here. Okay, but let's move on to loops because um, you need to be able to loop if you want to do things like create a sorting algorithm. Now, I know the word algorithm sounds scary, but algorithm is just a function, just steps to take. The computer takes a certain number of steps to try to solve a problem. Let's look at looping. Now for this, gonna create a new project or a new folder. I'll say new. Let's say um, let's call it loops, and let's open this with VS Code. Let's create a new file in here called index.html. And um, now, so far I've been doing stuff either in the browser or here, but you could also do it directly in the console, the terminal right here. But that's only if you have Node.js installed. I haven't made you guys install it yet, but if you type node dash dash version, you can check if you have it or not. If it gives you a version, then you have it. If it gives you an error, then you probably don't have Node installed. But if you do have it installed, you could type in Node, and then it'll say welcome to Node.js, type help for more information. But now we're inside, like, basically you could do JavaScript inside this little arrow. So this little thing indicates that you're in JavaScript mode. So you can do things like let's say return or create a function. Oops. Okay. So if you press enter, it's gonna try to execute. Just like in the browser window when you're whenever you want to go to the next line in the console, it's pretty similar to the console. You have to press shift enter. So if I type function and I want to go to the next line, I can't press enter. I have to do shift enter to go to the next line. Okay, so same thing here. And we could also clear this. Actually, no, we have to get out of JavaScript mode to clear it. To get out of JavaScript mode, you have to press Control C. And press Control C again. We're out of JavaScript mode, so I can clear that console. I'll type node again to go back in. And let's create a function. Okay. I guess shift enter doesn't work here. I'm not sure how you jump to the next line here. Maybe you have to press return. No, that wouldn't make that. That would be the same thing. Trying to figure out how to go to the next line without executing. I guess I haven't used it enough to even know that much, but we don't really need to use it. But there should be, I mean, you could just Google it real quick how to go to the next line without executing. But anyway, let's just do how we've been doing it. Create a script tag at the end of the body. We could write our JavaScript in there directly, or we could link it to a actual JavaScript file. Let's just keep it here, just keep it simple. Okay, so loops. There's different ways to loop. There are certain objects in JavaScript you could loop through, some you can't. Arrays are one of the most easy to loop through. Okay, so for looping, through an array. There's a few different ways we can do it. Okay, so first of all, let's create an array. Let's say fruits equal apple, banana, watermelon, kiwi. Okay, we have our array. Now, why would you need to loop through an array? Um, well, maybe you want to print out a sentence for, I don't know, maybe you want to do something like, um, I have, or, oops, of course we can't write it like that. We want to write a function first. And we want to return, first let's loop and then we'll do the return. We want to loop through fruits. So we want to say fruits dot for each. So for each is a built-in array method for looping through arrays. It only works on arrays, remember? So it's one of those in the notes I listed. Let's close that. One of the array methods that I listed. So array methods, you'll see one of them is called for each, calls a function once for each array element. So we already seen, I think I've showed you already how to use it. But we can say fruits dot for each fruit. You can do something with each one. So you can say well, we could console log, or we could just return it. Fruits dot for each fruit. Actually, we need to create a sentence. Let string equal, we'll just create an empty string. Okay, so we're starting off with an empty string, but we're going to slowly add to that string. We're going to say, and actually we need to start this off right there before looping. So we create the string, keep it empty, and then for each fruit, we're going to say string plus equals fruit. This is just a very simple way to just create a string with all of those inside. And then return string. What are we missing? Oh, we didn't give it a name. Function print fruits. And let's open this in fruits dot for each fruit. Oops. Gotta make sure that this entire thing is enclosed in the so for each takes in a actual function, so we can't say fruits dot for each fruit and that's it for the function. No, this whole thing has to go inside. So we need to move this closing parenthesis, or actually we need to just add another set of parentheses. Close it here. If I do an arrow function, this will be easier to see. Let me just erase it because now it's confusing. But fruit stuff for each fruit. So now we have a actual arrow function in there. We want to string plus equals fruit. Return string. And let's inspected, console. The function is called print fruits, so that should give us all of the fruits. Oh, we need to execute it. Don't forget the parentheses. It's returning undefined, so let's see why. Let string equal that. String plus equals fruit. Return string. Close these. Close that. Was this? No, that's not it either. OneDrive, I could close that. I got too many windows open. Okay, print fruits. Why is it giving us undefined? We're returning something, so that means string is undefined. It cannot be undefined because it is defined. We have let string fruit stop for each fruit, string plus equals fruit. Now let's try a different one. Let me just say return fruit. Just to troubleshoot, I'm gonna return just that and see what that will give us. Print fruits. We're still getting undefined. Now let's check fruits. Fruits is there. String. String with the lowercase. Oh, you remember that we have some reserved words. Maybe I shouldn't be calling this a string. Let's call it my string. Return my string. My string is not defined. Oh, okay. Of course, my string is gonna say not defined. Can anyone guess why? Remember what I said about scoped variables? So if something is defined inside any brackets like this, this my string is defined inside this function print fruits. It doesn't exist outside of it. So in order to be able to access it here, type my string and actually see the value of it, this would have to actually be defined outside. So why don't we just do that? Because it doesn't really matter if it's defined outside or in here. So now that it's out there, we should be able to type my string and we get the empty string. So that's working now. And we want to add to that string. So we're going to say for each fruit, my string plus equals fruit. So let's try one more time. Print fruits. We're still getting undefined. The concatenation maybe doesn't work with plus equals. I'm not sure if that's the case. I think it should though. We could just try my string equals my string plus fruit. Try it that way. Still undefined. Fruit dot for each fruit. My string equals string plus fruit. Return my string. Huh. I don't know if you guys can spot why, but I don't know. I guess I can't spot it. Make this smaller and zoom out a little bit. Take a good look at it. See if we can figure this out. Now again, there should be no reason why it's returning nothing. It's just giving me undefined. Oh, I know why. Because we're returning my string inside the for each. We're not supposed to return it there. We're supposed to return it after. So don't forget that whole thing is inside a function. It's the function that needs to return something, not the for each loop. Okay, so maybe now it'll work. Yep, there we go. So now it just took all of those fruits and stuck them next to each other. So this should have worked the original way. My string plus equals fruit. It's just a shorter way of writing what I just wrote. There we go. So you gotta be careful where you're returning. Return just exits the brackets that you're currently in. So it was returning it, but it was just returning it to this print fruits function, which in by itself itself had to return it. So uh, anyways, the function is the one that needs to return something, because the function is what you're calling. You're saying print fruits, you type print fruits and you expect it to give you something, return something. And since this was not there, it was just giving us undefined, because I had it inside here instead of in here. So it doesn't matter if you return something here to here, it gets returned to here. It doesn't get returned outside of it. So um, I don't know if that makes sense, but again, the function is the one that has to return it in order to see the result. So we could do return my string, or we can say return or my string plus equals I have one plus period and a space. Let's see if that works. So we'll call it again, inspect and then console. Print fruits. I have one apple, I have one banana, I have one watermelon, I have one kiwi. So you can see it's looping through each fruit and attaching some text to it, but I should have put a space right there after I have one. So there's a space after the number. So now it's saying I have one apple, I have one banana, I have one watermelon, I have one kiwi. So I'm looping through, counting them. We could also, if I put like multiple apple, because you could have apple, and say another apple, 3 apples, let's put 2 kiwis. Alright, so now I have a couple of the same items inside the array. So now it wouldn't make sense if I said I have one of that. So now we'd have to add some logic to it. But we can still use the for each in this somehow. So now I'm gonna go through the fruits, and let's see, maybe for each wouldn't work for this one. Let's see, you could for each lets you perform a function once for each item in the array. Actually, we can say let fruit string equal this. I'm gonna put this actually outside of the loop. Okay, because we don't want to set this to fruit string. We don't want to set fruit string to an empty string each time we loop through, or else it's always just going to be an empty string. Instead, we set it before we start looping, and then we loop through the fruits. And I want to be able to count how many apples I have. So let's try to think of how we could do this. I didn't think of it beforehand, so hopefully I can get it right. But if we're gonna loop through these, we can count them by um, let's look at what other array methods we have available, because we're gonna have to use other ones, not just these methods. So we've got uh, every, which checks if every element in an array passes a test. We have filter, creates a new array with all elements that pass the test in a testing function. Find returns the value of the first element in an array that passed the test in a testing function. Find index, which we looked at last time, includes index of da, 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 map pop. I don't know if we could use any of these actually. Shift slice. Hmm. Okay, this might be tougher than I thought to count them. Let's say fruit string plus equals fruit. Okay, then we also need to count the fruits, so okay, I think I need to give this one up. This is gonna be too hard. I'm pretty sure I've done it before, but it's just one of those things. How do we do it? Count the apples and the kiwis. We could add. It would be easier if I was just counting the number of apples, but let's do that. To begin with, let's simplify it. Let apple or num of apples equals 0. We'll start with 0. And this will be easier. We can add an if statement inside here. We'll say if fruit is equal to apple, then number of apples plus equals 1. Okay, so we'll loop through the fruits, and every time we see an apple, we'll say number of apples plus equals 1. We'll just add 1 to the number there. Starting from 0, we'll count up. And then we can just return number of apples. So then it would make sense to call this function print number of apples. Okay, so starting out small might help us. Print number of apples. Oops. Execute it with the parentheses, and it gives us 3, so that's working. But that's only counting one of the fruits. Print number of apples, we get 3. Okay, but again, it's making use of loops, the for each loop. Um, Now, if we want to count all the other fruits, and what if we didn't know it's an apple in there? That's where it starts getting tricky. Okay. Um, Yeah, it's gonna be a tough one. We could also check kiwis, of course. That wouldn't really make no difference. Now it's gonna say 2 because we're actually checking number of kiwis. Number of kiwis. 2. And it doesn't matter. They don't have to be next to each other. I could put a kiwi after apple here. It should still count it the same. Put one after banana, just to be sure. Print number of kiwis. Now we got 4 because there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So what do we need to do if we want to count every single fruit that's in here? Well, we could do this. We could loop through, okay? We could create a new array. So this array is the original array, but we can create a new array that just has one of each. And actually, it wouldn't be a regular array. It would be an array of objects, okay? Because we're basically gonna need to create an object like this for each fruit. I'm gonna say like fruit. All right, it's gonna have a name. So let's say apple, and then number. Say 3 or whatever number we put in there. And why do I have a thing here though? This little error. Name apple number 3. It's just an object, I guess, because I just put it there. Let my fruit equal name apple number 3. There we go. Okay, so for each of the fruits, we have to create an object similar to this. So it's gonna have 2 properties: name and a number. Okay, and the number is gonna start out with 0, and the name is also just gonna start off. Well, it'll get created, and then it'll take the name. But we're gonna have to loop through and create all of that. So for each fruit, so we need to start off with that objects array. It has to exist outside of this function so that we can basically access it outside of the function later. So we say let fruits. Actually, we already called this one fruits. My fruits, or let's call it fruit objects. So it'll just be an empty object. So first we create an empty object called the fruit objects. Then this, let's call it print number of fruits again, because that's what we're gonna try to do here. And we don't need a number of apples here. We just need, okay, so we need to be able to check this inside the loop. We're gonna say fruits dot for each fruit. We're gonna say if fruit objects dot contains, not contains. There's no contains function. Let me go back to our JavaScript notes. We need filter. Actually, no, not filter. We could use find index or includes, determines whether an array includes a certain amount. So if fruit objects dot contains or includes, I keep mixing it up. Includes and sorry, that should be an array, not an object. If fruit objects includes fruit dot name. How's this gonna work? Because this is gonna be an array, and we need to check if it includes a certain element. I don't know if we could check if it's gonna include like an object. What if it's an array full of multiple objects, like name, apple, name, nana, number, let's say, I don't know, just 3, number 0, or no, we have 1. Okay, so how do we loop through there? Let me just again backtrack here. Inspect. How would we check if an array includes a certain object? Because it's not like just a string where you could just type in the name of the string. So let's just let that exist in there. Let me open it. Oh, let me get rid of the errors actually before I do. Just close that for now and get rid of the error. Inspect fruit objects. So we have our fruit objects, but let's see. Fruit objects dot contains. Okay, it's giving an error, so I guess we cannot use contains on that. Why not though? Thought we should be able to use it. Or oof, nope, I used contains again. It includes, not contains. Always forget. Okay, does it include banana? Of course not, because yeah, it only contains these objects, but how do we check for them? Do I have to put the whole object in there? See, even if I put the same exact object, name, apple, number 3, just like I have it there, it's still gonna give me false if I check if it includes that. So it's different than if it was just like apple and banana. If it was just that, then I could easily check with includes. It'll give me true. Right? But if you have an actual object, it's a little more difficult. So it would be easier if includes took in a function. Then we could maybe use that function to dig into the object and check the properties. But I don't think that's the way includes works. Maybe you can, because I don't know. Let's look it up. JavaScript array includes. If not, then I might be able to use find index. Case sensitive. It doesn't say anything about what it takes in though. If it uses same. Yeah, I guess this is a situation where find index will actually be more useful. In the previous example, um, I used includes. Was it for that other lesson? And using what was it? This I think it was this lesson. Let's open it with Notepad. Yeah, so I had this function about entering the club. Remember that one? And where do we use includes? We said if VIPs dot includes name, then you could come on in. If not, beat it. And then I did a different version with find index. Remember I had to return. You have to check if find index returned a negative number. That would mean that it's not in there. So I was using if index is less than 0. But the good thing about find index, yeah, it's not as simple as includes, but remember includes just takes in a name or a string here. But find index takes in a whole function. So you can do more with that. I think that's what we need to do. So we can dig into the actual object here. If we're gonna create objects, right? Because I'm not trying to just put apple, banana in there because that's what the original string is. I want to be able to hold objects that give me a name and a number. Okay. So if we do it that way, maybe then we could um, look at the properties of it and then we can go from there. So fruit objects. Okay, that's our object. Fruit objects dot find index. Okay, so now again find index. Wait, sorry, you can't see that. It's here. Fruit objects dot find index. But again, what's nice about this, it's a little more complicated than includes, but um, there's situations where you have to use it like this one, because we need to be able to take in an actual fruit objects. And just call this object, call it whatever you want, but it's gonna be a temporary placeholder for each of these objects. It's gonna represent those. So it's gonna loop through all of the objects, and we're gonna be able to now use this function to check the actual name, and we can check the properties now because we're accessing it like this. We can say return object dot name is equal to apple or banana. I put banana. I thought I put banana. I guess I just put banana. Let's try that again. But yeah, this is better. Now we can actually access it. But with includes, you can't really do anything if it's an object. It has to be a string. So does that make sense? With again, if this was just apple, banana, not an object with name, apple, number 3. If it was just regular strings, we could use includes. but now we have to actually use a different way. We gotta use find index, because find index takes in a function, and you can use that function to dig into the object. Okay, so here we'll say, um, so we're gonna, this is our function. We need to loop through fruit objects and then figure out every time we see the same object, or every time we see an object that we don't have inside the fruit object. So we're gonna start out with empty fruit objects. So it's just gonna be empty, and I'm gonna say fruit objects dot find index object. I'm gonna loop through there and see if we have um, and we don't really want to return anything necessarily on this one. Actually, before we do the fruit objects dot find index, we're gonna first loop through it. We're gonna loop through fruits. So fruits dot for each fruit. So this kind of, now it's gonna get into like a loop inside a loop. So for each fruit, we're gonna look inside fruit objects, find index. We're gonna look for if um, if the object dot name is equal to fruit, and we want to let's use an if statement for this instead of a ternary. If fruit objects actually object is equal to huh. I already forgot what I was doing. Um, we're digging into fruit objects, but I have no objects in there to dig into right now. So object dot name is equal to fruit. It's gonna return the index. But what are we gonna do with that though? Yeah, it's gonna give me an index of negative, but geez, I didn't think this one through. What does this give us so far? Well, it's gonna return something to the loop. Um, yeah, this I gotta scratch this one, guys. It's just way too complicated. Instead, I'll just show you how to do a looping sorting algorithm. Okay, I had these lessons prepared. I don't know why I didn't use these. Trying to do some new stuff, getting myself confused, but there we go. 154. I probably even have that example here somewhere, but here. Let's just do something with loops here. Do I have any with loops? Capitalize. Capitalizing letters, I think, requires a loop. No, not that one. That's not a good example. I'll just use the sorting algorithm. But then this gets into, again, looping inside a loop. Open. And for each is one way to loop through things. There's also the for loop. I don't really use the for loop anymore since most of the time you're looping through an array. So again, I'll bring up that fruits. Let me undo erasing it actually. Let's keep the fruits array. So if you want to loop through fruits, you can do it with fruits.forEach. And then you'd have to type it like this, which is the preferred way to do it. It's using a for each because it kind of makes it easier. You just give it a temporary name and you could do something with each fruit. But there's also the for loop, which looks like this. For let I equal 0, I is less than fruits.length, I plus plus. This is kind of, if you didn't have a built-in for each method on arrays, this is the way you would have to loop through them. You start with the iterator. So that's why I put an I here for iterator. You start counting from 0, okay? Because you want to start counting from the first index. And then this middle thing that I put here, that's how far do you want to count. I want to count up to the length of fruits. So fruits has a length of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. But I'm not going to count all the way up to 9. I'm going to count to 8 because we're counting from 0. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I is less than fruits.length means it's less than 9. So we're only going to count up to 8, that means. And every time we loop through, we're just going to increase I by 1. I plus plus just means I plus equals 1. Okay, so this is how you start the for loop. Okay, so just put I plus plus there. And then if you want to loop through fruits, you can say, instead of, you're not going to have that temporary variable fruit. Instead, you're going to say fruits I, right? That gives you the first fruit and the second fruit and the third fruit. Every time you loop through, this I is going to increase from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they're each going to take turns as fruits I. Okay, and you can do something with them just like we did before. I can create, let's say, let my string equal just an empty string. Now we can say my string plus equals fruits I. Let's say fruits I plus just a space there, just so we have a space between each fruit. And that should give us the same thing as before, except I didn't put it in a function this time. I guess putting it in a function was kind of unnecessary unless you want to be able to call it whenever. But if I do it this way, then I don't need to execute the function. I could just check for my fruits immediately. Oh, my string is not defined. Oh, my sting. That's why. Spelled that wrong. Inspect. Okay, so if we check my string, we get apple, 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 kiwi, banana, kiwi, watermelon, kiwi, kiwi. So it did the same thing as before, except if you want to look more like what I did before, I put it in a function. I called it print fruits or something, but it's the same thing, except now instead of a for each, I'm using a for loop. Okay, so you need to understand for loops um, because there are situations where you're looping through something that's not an array. And remember, for each is only for arrays. Sometimes you have other types of objects that you can loop through. Um, like for example, you could also loop through a string. Like you could loop through each character inside a string. You can't really do that with a for each because for each is only for arrays, not strings. But you could loop through a word. For example, let's create another function right here. Let's do my string equal hello. Okay, you can't say my string dot for each and then like loop through each letter or whatever. That would not be possible because it's not an array. I'll just type something here, but it's gonna give us an error. For each, let's say new string equal should put an underscore plus. I'll just put an empty string, and here I'll say for each letter, just put an underscore in front of it or something. Just as a quick, simple example, underscore plus letter. Again, this is gonna not work because it's gonna say it's not a function, or it's gonna give us some kind of error. And also, I forgot one more thing, which is don't forget to make that an arrow function. Okay, but you can see here it says my string dot for each is not a function. The reason why is because again my string is a string, it's not an array. So you can't loop through it with a for each. So in that situation you would have to loop through with a for loop. So instead of my string dot for each letter, this that, you could say you could say for let I equal 0. I is less than my string dot length I plus plus, and okay, so now we could actually loop through the letters of that word here. Let's say new string plus equals underscore plus my string I. Okay, now it should work. So if we check what is my string, or my string is hello, what's new string? New string is hello with underscore in front of each letter. Okay, so that's why you might have to use a for loop instead of a for each. I showed you for each first, but the for loop is actually kind of more simple. It's just kind of a weird syntax when you're writing it. Like you have to do this let I equal 0, I is less than my string dot length, I plus plus. There's also another one that's very similar to the for loop, Um, and that is the while loop. Okay, and let me before I show you the while loop, there's a couple things here that's not super important. Like the let I equals 0, you don't really have to put that there. I mean, you could put it outside. You could define let I outside of there, like this. You could say let I equal 0, and then you could just put 4, but you still have to put this semicolon there. It's just a rule. So if this was outside here, you would still need this semicolon, okay? I mean, that should still work the same. Oh, I didn't show you this, by the way. It was on my other screen. There. So new string hello. It still works even if you take the let I equal 0 outside, as long as you still have that semicolon there. But there's no reason to do that. It's just confusing. So always write it like this. Always start with the iterator where you want to start counting from. So counting from 0. Start with you want to count up to the length of whatever you're counting. So I is less than my string dot length. And you want to count by ones, but you could always count by twos. I mean, I could say I plus equals 2, and then it'll skip a letter. It won't count each letter. It'll just do, I think it'll start with E and then L. It'll just give me EL, I think. Let's try it out. Um, new string. It gives us HLO, right? Because it's counting from 0. But since we're skipping, counting, we're saying I plus equals 2. It's skipping the E. It's going from 0 to 2, and then from 2 to 4. So it's giving us the H, the L, and the last O. When did these pop up and refresh? Yeah, so that's why it's giving us HLO. You could also count it backwards. It's another thing that's cool about the for loop. You can, instead of saying I equals 0, I could say I equals my string dot length minus 1 though, because we need to count from 8, not 9, or not 8 and 9. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but we're counting from 0, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we don't want to count with the length, which is 5. We want to count with the length minus 1. So we're starting from the higher number. So that means, well, if we're going to do that, then we're going to count until I is greater than um, -1 or greater than equal to 0. Let's just say greater than -1. And instead of I plus equals 2 or plus plus, we're going to say I minus minus. Okay, so now we're going to count backwards. So I think that's one way to create a new string, but the letters backwards. So that should give us hello backwards. Yep, that's what it does. OLLEH. And if we just take away this thing here, we don't really need to plus this underscore, just plus the string is enough. This would be a function to reverse the order of letters for something. So if I said, can you make a function to print something backwards, you would have to put this in a function. Okay, actually, let's put it in a function right now so we could use it for any word that we choose, not just hello. We can say function print backwards. It's gonna take in something here. It's gonna take in a word or just a string. Doesn't have to be a word that really makes sense. But you could create a function called print backwards, stick this for loop in there, which again starts counting from the string. Well, in this case, just string, the string that's going to get passed into this. We're going to look at that string. And here too, string. Actually, we need a new string for this. We need to put new string here. So for that, new string plus equals string I. So this function now print backwards, we should be able to type anything we want and print it backwards. And we need to also make sure this returns a result. We want to return new string. Okay, so now let's test it out. Close all of these. Okay, so I've created a function, named it print backwards. Let's type print backwards. Refrig. You can see as I'm typing, it's already returning the letters backwards. Refrigerator. Right? You can see here refrigerator, printing it back, rotar. Okay, print backwards. Apple. Print backwards. Banana. So it's a very easy way to use a loop to create a function that will print stuff for you backwards. Hello, ole. Okay, so that's one way to use a for loop. The same thing with a for each. I don't know if you no again you can't do for each because for each doesn't loop through strings. It's only for arrays. Um, and then there's the while loop, which is pretty similar to the for loop. It's pretty much the same exact thing, except that first part. While we don't do the whole iterator, but you do need to have it defined somewhere else. Like here, it's doing a plus plus. Let me zoom out again. Oops. Let's just show you here. So the for loop, you do for let I equal 0 or whatever number you want to start counting from. You have how far do you want to count, and this has to be something that will eventually return false, or else you'll end up with an infinite loop while I is less than like 100, for example. And then what do you want to count by? You want to count by ones, or you want to count by twos or threes or fours, right? If we do this, for let I equals 0, I is less than 100, I plus equals 5. We just, for example, we could just return I, or print I. We could say, put that in a string, I guess. Let my, let's call it fives. Say let fives equal empty string. And when we loop through here, we'll say fives plus equals I plus an empty space, just so they have some space. And can check that out. Inspect fives. And you can see here it's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, all the way up to 95. Okay, because I put while I is less than 100. So I reaching 100, you could say less than or equal if you want to include 100 in there. Where's that other window? Fives. Okay, so now it does count all the way to 100. If I want to count backwards, what do? I say I equals 100 instead of I equals 0, and I say while I is greater than or equal to 0. And also be careful here. You end up with an infinite loop, your browser will crash, you'll have to close it. But right now, if I left it like this, I'll crash it because we're saying I is 100, and we're gonna keep looping until I is greater than or equal to, or we're gonna keep looping until I is less than 0. So we're only going to keep looping while I is greater than 0. But here I'm saying I plus equals 5, so it's always going to increase. It's going to be 100, 105, 110. So it's never going to be less than 0, so that means it's never going to stop looping. Right, so you got to be careful. Say I minus equals 5. And then now if I count, or if I look at it, it should be backwards from 100 to 0. 100, 95, 90, 85. So of course, I don't have to say this, but you could put 2 in there and then count by 2s, of course. I mean, I still called it 5s, but we're counting by 2s now. And then the while loop is just while I is less than 30. And then it's the same thing, really, except you define all this stuff outside. So instead of putting it in here, let's call it J instead of I. The next letter in the alphabet, I'll say J, let J equal 0. Right? That's just, I'm defining that outside. While J is less than 30, I want to, let's also create a string here. Let's say let tens start from counting from 0. We'll count up to 100 again. And we'll say tens equal, make sure that's a string so we can concatenate to it. Concatenate just means add to it. Say tens plus equals J. Okay, but now again, I'll have an infinite loop. Why? Because I'm starting to count from 0, and while J is less than 100, 0 is less than 100. So yeah, it's gonna loop. Tens is gonna plus equal J, but J is never gonna change because I'm not changing J here. I'm not saying J equals this or J equals that. So J just stays 0. So since it's 0, it's always less than 100. You're just gonna have an infinite loop. So you have to remember to say J this case, plus plus, or plus equals 10, right? Because we're counting by tens. That's why I called it tens. So it's really similar, right? Here we put I equals 100, I is greater than or equal to 0, I is less, I minus equals 5. Here we're doing the same thing, except we're putting it outside of the while loop. So we're saying while j is less than 100, that part we keep it here, but the j equals 0 is out there, and the j plus equals 10 is in there, instead of all in one line, okay? So same thing. Yeah, we could test it out real quick. Type tens, it should give us 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. So that works. We still have our fives. I didn't take it out. But yeah, that's for loops and while loops. Just another way of looping. Okay, but when you have a array, you don't need to use it. You could just use for each. But it doesn't hurt to use this. It's just an alternative. I'm gonna actually, I'll save this too. Call this loops. I got rid of the for each loop. Should have kept that in here somewhere. Actually, that was not looping through an array anymore, by the way. That's actually, that is an array, but that's a string. Okay, we're not really using this for anything, are we? Let fruits equal that. No, right, so this doesn't need to be here. Get rid of that. We don't need this. Let me label these so you could like easily understand it. I'm gonna put it on the OneDrive. So this is function to print backwards, and using for loop. Use for loop count down from 100 by 5. Use while, oops, actually we're counting up in this case. Count up from 0 up to 100 by 10. Okay. So, I don't know, take a look at that. You'll get a good idea how loops work. I didn't get to show you the looping, the sorting algorithm, but that requires putting a loop inside a loop. I keep saying that, but I didn't get to try that one. I wasted time trying to do the other one, which I bet you is very simple, but I just couldn't think of how to do it. But I'll save this on the OneDrive. And let me give you the sign out code. It's already 9:53. The sign out code is